In the information below this video is a link to a talk by Jonathan Pageau, and I urge everyone to look at that. One of the issues that's constantly in Jungian psychology is symbolism, and unfortunately, although Dr. Jung talks about symbolism all the time, he never really sort of pins it down. And so when I found this video by Jonathan Pageau, I thought he had done really the best job I've ever seen of discussing symbolism. So rather than me try to regurgitate what I took down in my own notes, but I did take notes on what he said, and I thought this video is very good, so I would urge you to take a look at that. Now, paragraph 38 of The Secret of the Golden Flower. This Secret of the Golden Flower commentary that Dr. Jung did almost prefigures very much of Jungian psychology in my view. And so as we go through these items, I think it's very helpful to talk through each of these things. They're, we may not get through it fast, but we are addressing the mainstream issues. This is not a sidelight of Jungian psychology. This is the main deal here. And so in paragraph 38, he's talking about the circumambulatio. I recall telling my group early on, a couple of years back, that we would be circling around the center, and they probably figured, well, okay, we'll do that in a couple of weeks. And actually what happens is you start going down, and you keep going down and down and down and down and deeper, and there's actually no end to it, going around the center, and you mark off the sacred precinct, and it's a question of fixation and concentration. And so all sides of the personality become involved. Okay, so just recall the image that's on The Secret of the Golden Flower. This golden flower actually represents the Great One, the Psyche, which is emerging in all of us from the time of our birth. And so it's not us cramming stuff down into our minds. That's, of course, what I thought we were doing when I went to college, business school, and law school, but it's not that at all. It's finding our psyche is constantly trying to blossom in the same way a flower blossoms, and a flower knows what it's doing. And so at depth, our instincts know what they need. Let's put it that way. And so our self is constantly trying to tell us what we need, and that comes across in dreams and visions. In paragraph 39, then, Dr. Jung says that the movement is activating the light and dark sides of nature, self-know by self-brooding. So it's a question of examining yourself. When I was 40 years old, I turned off the radio, honestly. And, we live in a society where they want you to have a radio on and music playing in your ears all the time. And if you do that, you're not going to hear yourself. And I remember making a conscious choice when I was 40 years old to just turn the radio off. And when I did that, it was almost a sensation of fearfulness. I was afraid of what I would hear if I turned the radio off, what would come up from my unconscious, because obviously if we're blaring out the messages of our unconscious, we're not going to get anything. But if we turn the radio off, then we can hear ourselves think. I think that's a useful thing to do. I noticed that on the Toyotas that I've had recently, whenever I get in the car, it's automatically playing something off my iTunes, and I cannot figure out how to turn that off. Figure out how to turn off the functionality that automatically turns on some of the music in my iTunes, and so I have to consciously turn off the radio every single time, and I find that very irritating. I don't know, is it a way to control us? Maybe it is, because if we can't hear ourselves think, then we can't think about anything that the powers that be might not like us to think about. In paragraph 40 now, there's a very interesting experience that Edward Maitland had in the 19th century. And so I wanted to read it to you. Edward Maitland was the biographer of an empath named Anna Kingsford. And so his book is Anna Kingsford, Her Life, Letters, Diary, and Work. But he had a central experience, and this is going back to the issue of religious experience. So this is in paragraph 40 of The Secret of the Golden Flower. Here's what Jung says. He had discovered that when reflecting on an idea, related ideas became visible, so to speak, in a long series apparently reaching back to their source, which to him was the divine spirit. By concentrating on this series, he tried to penetrate to their origin. He writes, I was absolutely without knowledge or expectation when I yielded to the impulse to make the attempt. I simply experimented on a faculty, being seated at my writing desk the while in order to record the results as they came, and resolved to retain my hold on my outer and circumferential consciousness, no matter how far toward my inner and central consciousness I might go, for I knew not whether I should be able to regain the former if I once quitted my hold of it, or to recollect the facts of the experience. At length I achieved my object, though only by a strong effort, the tension occasioned by the endeavor to keep both extremes of the consciousness in view at once being very great. Once well started on my quest, I found myself traversing a succession of spheres or belts, the impression produced being that of mounting a vast ladder stretching from the circumference toward the center of a system, which was at once my own system, the solar system, the universal system, the three systems being at once diverse and identical. Presently, by a supreme and what I felt was a final effort, I succeeded in polarizing the whole of the convergent rays of my consciousness into the desired focus. And at the same instant, as if through the sudden ignition of the rays thus fused into a unity, I found myself confronted with a glory of unspeakable whiteness and brightness, and of a luster so intense as well nigh to beat me back. But though feeling that I had to explore further, I resolved to make assurance doubly sure by piercing, if I could, the almost blinding luster, and seeing what it enshrined. With a great effort I succeeded, and the glance revealed to me that which I felt must be there. It was the dual form of the sun, the unmanifest made manifest, the unformulate formulate, the unindividuate individuate, God as the Lord, proving through his duality that God is substance as well as force, love as well as will, feminine as well as masculine, mother as well as father. Paragraph 41, Dr. Jung says, he found that God is two in one, like man. Besides this, he noticed something that our text also emphasizes, namely suspension of breathing. That was a description of Edward Maitland's religious experience. It sounds very much like Nicholas of Cusa's experience as I understand it, and I acknowledge that I'm not well versed on Nicholas of Cusa. Jung also said in paragraph 41, it amounted to a rebirth on a different plane of existence. I think that the point is that once you've had one of these religious experiences, then you know. Then you don't need to believe, you know. And so I've actually had 2 of them on video, which if you look at, there's a playlist on this channel called Breakthroughs to the Unconscious. And on that playlist, you'll find a couple of my actual breakthroughs on the video and descriptions of others that I've had in my lifetime. Paragraph 42, vision of the light is an experience common to many mystics, unconditioned and absolute, combination of supreme power and profound meaning. And what I thought was interesting was that it seemed to me like E equals mc squared. Everything is either energy or matter, and it's the switching back and forth between the two that drives the universe. So in paragraph 43, he's talking about an acute state of consciousness as intense as it is abstract. It's detached consciousness, and it cannot be attained by conscious will. Consciousness is always partisan. Unconscious can be reached only by symbols. Paragraph 45 cannot be thought up. It touches on the deepest layers. I have a note here, the ancient Rhodesia example, which is an example of the mandala, which is what the golden flower is also. So it's the mandala is always representing a central point of consciousness. Okay, so it has to grow from forgotten depths, its loftiest intuitions of the spirit, and it fuses present-day consciousness to age-old past life. So I will share my notes for a few minutes. The reason I want to do this is because I want you to see these images. Okay, so one of the points that Dr. Jung makes in paragraph 46 is that the unconscious is decidedly disintegrating. And one of his famous quotes is this quote that 100 admirable persons in a room make one blockhead. Now, why is that? It basically says that if I'm in a room and I'm talking to you, you will go, and you won't necessarily challenge me. And the more people that are in the room, the less likely it is that you will challenge me. And so we can see this in orators, for example. The more people that are present, the more people will say or cheer, and the fewer people that will challenge, and that can become a psychic epidemic. Now, Dr. Jung wanted to talk about this meditation symbol here. This is the 4th stage of meditation, and of course, from the golden flower point of view, the adept is looking at issues from all points of view. So he's got 5 disciples, and he's looking at whatever issue it is from all 5 disciples' point of view. And he's also, in this case, looking at it from the 5 disciples' point of view of all the 5 disciples. So he's actually looking at a problem from 25 different points of view. And this is the best way to solve a problem. But as Dr. Jung says, this would be a schizophrenic process if it were to become a permanent state. So in other words, these images, you have to remember that they are illusions, that they're not real. In Buddhist meditation, you think of them as illusions, and you think of them, you know that they will go away. If they can be autonomous psychic entities, however, and so if they become that, then you get the Sybil phenomenon, where you get multiple personalities going around in your unconscious, and then you're in trouble. And so the one thing I wanted you to remember is too much of the animal distorts civilized man. Too much civilization makes sick animals. Now, so the mandala is the protecting circle, and it was seized upon to protect the unity of consciousness from being burst asunder by the unconscious. And so there's mandalas that have been found as long ago as 35,000 years. And what's interesting to me is that these two symbols that are beneath the colorful one here are symbols from the movie Arrival, and these are the method of writing of the aliens. And if you look at symbols of the Uroboros, the one on the left here, which looks like which has a sun in it, that is an alchemical Uroboros. And the one, well, they're both alchemical Uroboros, but the one on the left is from the 16th or so century. The one on the right is from the 3rd century. So the Uroboros also symbolizes the creative impulse of the new beginning. It is the wheel that rolls of itself, the initial rotary movement in the upward spiral of evolution. And I took that from Erich Neumann's The Origins and History of Consciousness. Dr. Neumann was one of Dr. Jung's closest disciples. And here are examples. Kekule supposedly got the idea for the structure of benzene in 1872 because he had a dream of the Uroboros. And so here you can see his description of the structure of benzene. And that intuition came to him because he had a dream of the Uroboros. So it runs through the whole of Buddhism as well. So as you see here in the Golden Flower, the first stage of meditation, the adept is simply gathering himself. Then in the second step on the right side, you see him feeling something that's happening from his center, in this case from his gut. And then in the third case, you see the image of the adept with the adept looking down on himself. And so he's out of duality now. He's looking down on himself and his problems as a detached person. And what's interesting about this, and I think what captured Dr. Jung's attention, is the image on the right is an image that he made, Dr. Jung made in the Red Book about 10 years before he saw this other image. And in Dr. Jung's image, this is the adept who is Christ, and he is over the city of Geneva, and he has above him the energy of the Holy Spirit, presumably, something like that is meant. And so what got Dr. Jung's attention was that the imagery from the East from 3,000 years ago is the same imagery that evolved in his own mind. And so then, of course, this runs through all of Buddhism. The favorable as well as the unfavorable are illusions and still to be overcome. You know, if you're having ideas like that and they're running amok with your unconscious, then you need mental health help, and for schizophrenia possibly. But this is also an image of having wholeness in your life, of being able to see every issue that comes up in your life from a different perspective. Dr. Jung says, note, the psychologist is concerned not with the substantiality of these complexes, but with psychic experience. Without a doubt, they are psychic contents that can be experienced, and their autonomy is equally indubitable. They're fragmentary psychic systems that either appear spontaneously in ecstatic states and evoke powerful impressions and effects, or else in mental disturbances become fixed in the form of delusions and hallucinations, consequently destroy the unity of the personality. So this isn't toys we play with, folks. But nonetheless, just being aware of it can be helpful. I'm going to stop the lecture per se at this point. Thomas says Chartres Cathedral's labyrinth is perhaps an example of a Western mandala. Also, see mandorla. Yeah, definitely. Mandorla is two mandalas that cross one another, and in the center where the two are common is, you know, the best part, the common meeting ground. That's where a marriage is best. And obviously you'd want to have a good mandorla in your psyche for your marriage. And also at Chartres is the rose window. Rose windows appear in almost all cathedrals, and they are ways of pulling. The mandala of the rose windows is a way to pull the psyche together and to make one feel comfortable. And so, as I said, when I was 30 and a deacon in the Reformed Church, I didn't know why, but when I went to church on Sunday, I felt better afterward. I didn't know why, and I'm starting to understand that there was something unconscious going on in the ritual that was helping me, but at that time I really didn't have a clue. I couldn't figure it out. And also I am going to put my contact information up. This will allow you, if you want to have access to our Dropbox, you can write me at skip.conover@gmail.com, and I will put you in our Dropbox. And I urge you to join our advanced reading group, where we are studying in great detail Ion, and we are doing that on Zoom, so it is a video conference in which all of you can participate by voice, not only by chat, as you can here. Is David? Yes, David Garrett's son, S-A-N, is my nom de plume. And what do you think Dr. Jung meant by symbol? Well, I think you should go and watch Jonathan Pageau, because I don't think I can sum it up that easily. And he's done a marvelous job. I learned from him, in fact. So I'm going to leave the definition of symbol to Jonathan Pageau. But I think the overall point is that our life is in many dimensions, and those dimensions are not linear and they're not rational. And so they can only be described symbolically. So this is why when you're dreaming, your dream can't talk to you. Most of the time it can't talk to you. And, sometimes I do hear an ex cathedra voice, or I see something that's written, but almost always it's not that. And even when it is that, it is symbolic, and it's up to me to interpret what it means. Just to give you my simplest example, every time I have a very frequent vision, it comes up every second day probably, and the vision is a vision of a modern police car going from right to left across my field of vision with the word police across the side of the car. And every time I have that vision, I slow down and mind my P's and Q's, because I know that that vision means that within 1 minute or 2 minutes at the most, I will see police activity. It'll be a speed trap, or it will be an accident, or all kinds of things, but it will be something involving police. And in my ancient archaic brain, my deep unconscious probably interprets police as predator, I suppose. And so instead of giving me an image of a lion or a tiger, it's giving me an image of a police car, and it's saying predator or danger. Maybe not predator, okay, that's not being kind to the police force, but it's probably saying something like, pay attention here. I find that it always works. And so, whereas and as I said, I'm quite intuitive, so whereas an S person, a sensing person who has to get all the details, they probably need a radar detector on their dashboard. I have no need. I know when I'm going to come upon a speed trap, because there are certain cues in the environment that my unconscious picks up on, and boom, I get that image. And so that image is a symbol that tells me that that's something like that is happening. That's, I guess, the best I can do for that.